am so excited today. This is Dr. Carrie Hepburn from Compass PD, and I get to talk with my good friend, April Burton. And I want to tell you that April has been in education. Oh my gosh, April, how many years have you been in education now?
This is my 21st year in education.
Wow. Wow. April and I worked together for several years in a large suburban school district outside of St. Louis. And so she's been a good friend for a long time. April started her career as an English teacher, a secondary English teacher, and then she became a French teacher, English turned French teacher in high school. She is a technology junkie, if you didn't know that. Like, she believes that we can use technology, and she believes and lives out that we can use technology to engage and innovate, be innovative. Something that you may not know about April is that she is an ISTE certified educator, a Google certified educator. She's been like an METC spotlight educator and teacher of the year, regional teacher of the year. And so she just has this amazing pedigree in education. But something about April you may not know is, first of all, she is one of the most positive, inspiring educators I've ever been around. But she truly believes in the importance and the power of growing knowledge and learning, and the power of learning, and not only for students, but also for educators. And this is something that she, even if you're not comfortable with technology, she makes you just feel like you can do it. Like, she believes in you. And so that's one of her many gifts as an educator. So welcome, April, today to the Compass PD podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I want to let you know, I already have my professional notebook and I have like my bazillion pens because I am ready to take some notes today. Today, we're going to talk about blended learning. And April, could you just, there seems to be some confusion, or at least on my part, because this week I've had many conversations, and those conversations have been, we're doing blended learning because we're using Google Classroom, or we're doing blended learning because we're using digital text. So what is blended learning?
So I get that question asked often, and there is a textbook definition, and most people go to the research from the Christensen Institute and take their definition, which really says that it is a combination of face-to-face learning in a brick and mortar or asynchronous environment paired with with synchronous learning paired with asynchronous learning, where students have choice over maybe the pace of their learning or the path of their learning, maybe where that learning is going to take place. So when my little elevator speech about blended learning is really, we give students choice and we meet with students face to face to help them to really meet their learning goals, because we know kids are continuously all over the place. I always use the analogy of, we can't throw chicken feed out and hope that they're all going to get it. We really have to meet each student where they're at, or we're going to lose them.
Definitely. That really sticks out to me because I do like the thought of making sure, are we meeting with students face to face and talking with them about their learning goals? I think that's something that we miss a lot of times in thinking about blended learning.
I really couldn't agree more. I think so often now, I have 15 years in secondary classroom experience. But by the time I got so many of my students in secondary, they had already made the choice whether they were a good student or not a good student. And most of my students, and this is the same, this is happening now, they feel like school is just the man. It's something that happens to them. And I firmly believe at an early age, we need to show our students that school is their choice. It's there for them. And it's yes, it is going to help them in their future, but they're not looking at what's going to happen in 10, 15 years. They're looking at what we're doing to them. And I want to change that. I want to change it to where kids feel like they get to have a say in their learning adventure.
I love that. I love that. Like, so you're segueing me perfectly into the next question, which is we don't want school to be something that's done to them. So, how does blended learning impact engagement? Like, what does that look like in student engagement and impacting student engagement?
Student engagement has always been a buzzword. I mean, for forever. Like when we were in, teacher prep in college, there was always units in every like teaching class about engagement and great engagement strategies, right? And so I'm constantly meeting with teachers to help them like have little tools in their toolbox to really engage kids. But the heart of student engagement is truly giving kids the opportunity to feel like they have a say in what happens. Because if you think about it from a student's perspective, especially like some of our elementary students, if they can't understand the content, they're frustrated and disengaged. Or if that content that we're delivering is below their level, they're also frustrated and bored and causing problems. I have my own kiddo. I mean, I have three very different kids that fall on each of those lines. But my own kiddo, how many times would I have to, go to parent teacher conferences and hear about how my child was causing disruptions in the classroom because he finished his worksheet in 5 minutes and the teacher expected it to take them 15 minutes. And so then he's talking to everybody. He's got a whole audience of people who's
Right,
bored. So
right.
when it comes to engagement, it's finding the right mix of what is going to speak to that particular student and where he or she is, which sounds so overwhelming as a teacher. Like, how in the world can I do that? But that's where technology comes in, because we have these tools and we have these ways of pulling in content on paper, but also using technology to engage those students.
Yes, and you were telling me one of the most amazing stories of some work that you're doing with some teacher teams now. Could you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that?
So whether you want to call this a learning progression or a playlist, like the terminology is different. Some people might even call it a choice board. But I'm working with a couple of teams and we're focusing on math, but I do fully believe this could go anywhere. But we are looking at the objectives, and we really want our students to think of learning as those learning objectives. And we're putting them in student friendly language and we're putting them all across. Really, we created a spreadsheet. And within that spreadsheet, there's ways for students to receive the content. So we call that the learn. There's ways for students to apply that content. And so that's the practice. And then there's ways for students to demonstrate their mastery of that concept. And so the students get choices on how they can receive that content. So it might be a teacher created video. It might be the content that has been explained through the textbook. You could also go and, use another teacher's content from YouTube. We could also, I've been working with high school classes in this very same way, where we're pulling in text content. So some students, they like to read step-by-step instructions. And so that could be pulled in as well. So the students get to choose. They might also really want direct instruction from the teacher. And so that's an option as well. So if they want direct instruction from the teacher, then they sign up and let the teacher know. So the students get to choose, and it's okay if they make the wrong choice. And this has been the hardest thing for some of our teachers is they know that this little kiddo really needs direct instruction because they can't keep their browser windows closed on a video long enough to focus, but it's okay. The teacher lets them make that mistake so that the student later on can see, oh, I didn't actually learn that well from the video. So it's all about giving students the opportunity to fail forward. So after they make their choice of how they want to receive the content, then they have choices on how they can practice with that content. And it's very important here that we're intentional about what those choices are, because we don't want everything to be on technology. And we definitely don't want everything to be where they're working independently. So we build in opportunities for them to work with a partner or with a team, or maybe doing some matching manipulatives where they're matching, you know, flashcards or whatever we've created to help them. So maybe it's matching the multiplication fact with the response on paper, gluing it down. And then maybe that reinforcement might be something like one of our many options for reinforcement online. So maybe it's Prodigy Math, or maybe this particular school has a subscription to IXL. So we pull in a blend of how students can practice, and we let them choose. And then when they're ready, they sign up for a meeting with the teacher to be able to show and demonstrate their learning. And this is in a series of a couple, sometimes 3, sometimes 2 assessments, where the teacher sits down with them and asks them a question. So if we're working on fact families, the teacher sits down and says, okay, well, show me a fact family, and show me how you could, show me how you understand it. They might give them like an on paper quiz where the teacher is sitting there with them and can go over the responses as the student is giving them or coming up with them. And then after the teacher decides that the student is ready, the student then can take an online assessment. And that might come from the textbook. It might be something that the team created. It might be something that is written into the curriculum. And then the teacher monitors that, and the student is notified whether or not they're ready to go on to the next standard, or
Wow.
if they need a little bit more practice, and then the teacher can point them to the right practice. And this is where those students who may have made the wrong content choice, the teacher can intervene in a positive way with them to say, you know how you chose the video, maybe for the next standard, let's have you meet with me and see if that makes a difference in your understanding. So it's really helping the students to get to know themselves. And the magic of it all is I get to go in with the automation process and help this to be less work on the teacher. And so the teacher really gets to spend that face-to-face time with the students, meeting the students where they are. And it's quality and positive conversations, instead of, you know, what we hear so often in classrooms is trying to redirect and trying to get students to focus and not bother their neighbors and all of that.
Wow. So a couple things are like sticking out to me. So one thing that I'm hearing is creating these progressions. If I don't know if you see very many of my videos, but I'm kind of like a freak about unpacking standards and creating progressions. It's like an obsession, because that improves our content knowledge of the content that we're teaching. And so as teachers have progressions, and maybe sometimes progressions come with a resource. I'm not sure how it was handled with some of the resources teachers have, if they have resources, don't. And so we just are flat out trying to figure it out and unpack on our own. But through those progressions, we have explicit learning targets, which we know is a high effect size on John Hattie's his visible learning research. And then I think what I'm hearing from you too are like there are multiple modes of instruction that are happening, and students get to choose preferred modes and can go back and have a variety of modes based on maybe a specific explicit target that they're learning, right?
Right.
And I'm also hearing like there are a variety of instructional strategies. Something that stuck out to me was doesn't mean that you're only on technology.
Right.
And I really think that's something that we get confused about, is we think that there's nothing that's ever going to replace relationships with the teacher or relationships with your peers. Like a computer or a program can't do that. And so I love that you're working with teachers to make sure that's incorporated in, because that's vital.
It is. And so often, our students at such a young age, they're handed mom and dad's cell phone to keep them busy at a restaurant, or they are playing video games and connecting with their friends often, which is that the social part. There are a lot of redeeming qualities as well, but we need our students to be self-aware of the choices that they're making and recognizing that, yeah, technology can really help me, but then there are also times where I'm so distracted by it. Like, I was giving an example to a student the other day that sometimes I have to print out an article so that I can step away from my computer and focus on just the words on the paper. Because if I'm looking at my computer, I'm going to open up another web browser and then I'm going to get distracted. And
Mm,
then 15 minutes later, I'll come back to this article, but I'm rushed. So
right.
just helping students to understand, people laugh at me, but I'm always the why. Like, why is it that technology is beneficial and not beneficial? And there is no reason for us to hide that from our students.
No,
And
no.
I don't really love saying you keep playing. Okay, so one of the things that drives me crazy is cool math games. Cool math games has nothing to do with math, and our kids love it because it's games. I mean, it's like Pac-Man. It's fun. It's
Right.
got that like dopamine effect. It's a
Yep.
video game. And kids
Yep.
are constantly wanting to play at all levels, not just our elementary, wanting to play cool math games. But there's a time for that. And I don't like saying, okay, you've shown me you can't use technology, so therefore you do not get a Chromebook. I don't like saying that. I like letting the kid tell me, I'm seeing that you're on cool math games. Why? And
Mhm,
why is that pulling you from the content on Epic that you're supposed to be reading? Are
mhm,
you like, and asking the right questions so that the student really becomes self-aware of, oh, yeah, I am making a bad choice. I need to figure out how I can make a better choice. And whether it's they're making their own little tally marks every time they leave the browser to go to another browser, we have to use our little classroom management techniques, but we have to make sure our kids are aware of why, so that we're not coming down hard on them.
mhm, mhm. Well, think about that for, I mean, you yourself who loves technology, like you know all the cool tools, and use technology efficiently and productively, but still are printing out articles to be able to do that, to annotate them or to really be able to focus on them. When I think about when I'm on technology, an email comes through and I've just lost my attention, or a shiny thing like is shining, there's some sort of shiny thing, and I've lost my attention again. And so I was reading some brain research, like neuroscience research recently, that every time we get distracted, it's like 15 minutes to get back on task. So I think that's going to be, not think, I know that's going to be something that we need to start teaching, recognizing in ourselves and teaching it explicitly to kids.
Yes. Yeah.
It,
There's a ton of research on it, but there's so much research on, students were given a task to do, and a control group had no distractions, no notifications, and then the other group was receiving text notifications throughout the task, and just the amount of time it took for the second group to complete it. But then their recall, when when they were asked to recall whatever it was they were doing, reading or whatever, they couldn't do it. I mean, and the data is there. No matter how brilliant we are, our brain can only handle a task at a time.
Mhm.
And just helping students to realize, yeah, you can go play cool math games, but let's do this first, and then you can get to that, because otherwise you're never going to get to cool math games, because every time you get off this browser window and you open it up and I see that you're there, then that's taking time away from you getting the original task done. So
Mhm.
let's make cool math games your reward. And then, just like I make Pinterest my reward, I can get on that after I've got all my tasks done.
I need to do that. I need to do that. Okay, so I'm quoting you on something, just so you know, it's going to be in my quote file. no matter how brilliant we are, our brain can only handle so much.
So true. Yeah.
And I think we need to spend more time, unpacking that. Not today, but another day. We really need to unpack that and how we can help educators and ourselves more with that and pulling that research together. So, what are some misconceptions that people have about blended learning? What are misconceptions you've seen?
So the biggest misconception I come across is people confusing digital learning for blended learning. I mean, if you unpack the word blended, it's taking two different things and putting them together. So we are taking face to face, that meaningful face to face interaction, and we're combining it with tools that we have online.
Mm,
And so when we think about, the history of technology was developed to make our lives easier. And that's the blended part of this, is using technology for the management to deliver the right content, to be online or offline content, to the students. The wealth of tools that we can pull in, like that's the technology part. But the face-to-face part is what's so often overlooked. And how can I make that time that I have with each student meaningful? So if we're taking time to edit students' writing, making sure that when the student comes to me, we are focused on whatever our goal is for that meeting, and making sure the student knows that as well as myself. I mean, there is such limited time. So I think that probably is the biggest misconception. And I also think a lot of people think digital learning or even blended learning, mixing some online content with face-to-face content. The thing that is often left off is the student goal piece. And I mean, our students today,
mhm.
blame it on COVID, blame it on having schools shut down. I'm not really sure what to blame it on, but that's not important. Our kids are really recognizing that, why should they come to class, sit down and be asked to be quiet, complete a worksheet where they're filling in blanks, and like they're all of a sudden realizing, I can question this. This isn't relevant to me anymore. So I'm gonna I'm gonna call a teacher out, or I'm just not gonna do it. That
Mhm.
relevance piece is is missing, and then that's where that disengagement piece comes in, where our kids are just like, no, not going to do it. So if we can make everything goal oriented and tie those goals into students' future success. So you want to be a famous YouTuber. Awesome. What do you think is important about a YouTuber? Oh, they have to be able to communicate their ideas. We've really got to tie this in so that it's meaningful to our students and their future goals, and revisit that, because when they get off task, we can point them back to those goals. So that's the part when I work with our blended teachers, and we're doing some really exciting things in our district, where at the high school level, we have blended courses that are flexible schedule courses, where students might not be expected to be in class every single day based on the blended structure. And one of the things that I've really been working with those teachers on is those goals. Call it a contract, call it a goal sheet, whatever it is. Have students articulate those goals, point them to the student's future, pull the parents in so the parents know those goals. And when I say pull the parents in, why can't a student write an email to mom and dad to say, so this quarter or this unit, my goal is to whatever, whatever, whatever. Copy the teacher on it. I mean, how empowering. Not only are we teaching students a valuable skill to be able to send an email, but we're also teaching that communication, that ability to advocate for yourself and
Right.
to be held accountable.
Yes.
It's an amazing approach. I've seen it happen with some sixth graders this year, and it gives me chills every time when I see these kids like writing an email and being so proud of the goals, and when they've achieved their goals, or letting their parents know, I struggled a little bit, but I think this is why. And here's how you can help me. I mean, it's on so many levels, so empowering.
Just like the reflection piece is so
Yes,
empowering there.
right.
Well, what tips, if somebody's brand new to blended learning, what would be some tips that you would give them to get started?
So I get asked this a lot too, because I'm the kind of person that I'm like, on that adoption scale, when you adopt new technology or new
Right.
systems, there's like the ones who are the early adopters and they're okay with making mistakes and moving forward. So that's me. But I work with a lot of people who are on the opposite end of the spectrum, and they don't forgive themselves when they make mistakes, and they want to see all the other people make mistakes before they do.
Right.
And so my biggest suggestion is always start small and get student input. So, like I said, and I always say this, technology is really there to help solve problems. So, identify where are we struggling and the why behind it, and ask your
Mhm.
kids, what are things that you want to see done differently? Or what are things you see in, this would be secondary, what are things you see in other classes that you wish I could do in my own class? Um, and even with the little kids, ask them. So I did this the other day when I was subbing. It was like, so it's the end of the day, we're packing up, which I did not realize in an elementary school classroom how long packing up takes.
It's a
But
big deal. It's a big deal
I
packing.
was like so excited to who have been in a third grade classroom with my secondary background. And I was like, so tell me, what are some tips you have for me? Because I know I'm going to be subbing again. And what are some things I should do differently? And the looks on their faces, like, no one's ever asked us for input. It really it empowers them to realize I am a stakeholder in this. I do have a say. So constantly getting student input, I feel like, is that first step in buy-in. And then from there, start small, make little changes. So where you're used to doing everything whole class, give two choices instead of five choices, because that's overwhelming for you as a teacher and that's
Right.
overwhelming for the students because they're going to be on choice number three after they looked at choice number one and number two and their time's up. So start small, get student input, then grow from there.
I love it. I love that. Start small, two choices. That feels doable. It doesn't feel overwhelming.
Right.
Where maybe when they hear some of the things, from earlier when you were talking about the work that you're doing and all of the things that are in place, that could feel overwhelming. But two things, just try two.
All right. Oh yeah, I'm sure when I talk about learning progressions, some people they're like, nope, not me, can't do that. And so they shut down. And I get it. That's it's a lot to take on. If you have a team that can help, that's ideal. But if
Right.
you can just, come up with two choices in a hyperdoc, let students move from top to bottom, get some input, then they're like, oh, the kids will see, like, oh, you're doing this for me. All
Right.
right. And
Right.
then there's buy-in there. And then if you feel like you're ready to grow, you can.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that. It is easier to add on than try to um, have like an enormous amount of things and then
Mhm.
take away because it really feels like you're failing. So it's easier
Right.
to add than it is to try to figure out what to take off. So
And I don't know if it's me, but I know for me in lesson planning, I would always take on too much. And then I would have spent hours and hours. I'm like, oh, well, that took 15 minutes with the kids. And,
right.
and that weighs on you. And then after a while, you're like, why should I even try? I don't want that to happen. So that's why when you can start small and grow from there based on student input, then it feels good. And then there's this new sense of excitement and joy from everyone in the classroom.
Yes. And we need that. We need that right now. We need some excitement and joy for everyone.
Mhm.
Um, the educators and the students. Everyone's working too hard not to feel
Right.
that excitement and joy.
So true.
Okay, so this has been really fun. First of all, I've learned so much and can't wait to be able to just dig more into some of these topics with you because I feel like we could spend days talking about ways we could impact students and student learning and even educator learning through blended learning and the power of this of this amazing, really, do you think of it more as like an instructional framework, kind of a way of designing our learning?
It is. And, because virtual meeting or because we can't pull teachers because of staffing shortage, we can't put a bunch of people in the same room because of social distancing. We've really had to rethink teacher learning, and blended learning is one of the best ways to do teacher learning, because then they can be the student and then that can translate into the classroom.
Yes, yes. That's so powerful. That's so thoughtful. So thoughtful. Okay, I have a couple fun personal questions.
Okay.
What is your favorite book?
Okay, so don't laugh. But my favorite book of all time is a golden book called There's a Monster at the End of This Book. If you've read it, it's very suspenseful because you have to make a choice whether or not you want to turn the page, knowing that there is a monster at the end of the book. I don't want to give away the ending, but it is a great one. So that's my all-time favorite. But then another favorite I have is the Poisonwood Bible. It was written, oh gosh, several years ago. It's just a great coming of age story about four sisters and the choices that they make based on how they grew up and the expectations of their family. It just has all the feels. It's a great book. So I can't decide on just one. Those are my two.
Well, I love that. First of all, there's a monster at the end of this book. I'm going to have to buy that because I'm going to have a grandbaby in like 10 weeks or 8 weeks. And then the second thing is I haven't read the Poisonwood Bible, but it sounds like it would be really
Great
good.
book.
I like all the feels when you read a book. That's all.
Me too. Typically, I just read nonfiction.
I know.
So that when I think back to my fiction books, that's my favorite.
Okay. That's something I need to work on because I only read books really for not for work. So I read nonfiction books and then I read kid books. And so someday I'm going to read like a book for fun for adults.
Well, even when I choose to read for fun, I'm choosing nonfiction. Like right now, I'm reading The 7 Ages of Paris, which is a history of Paris. And most people would pick it up and be like, this is so boring. But for me, it's fascinating. And I have a goal in my life to read a biography of every president. And so, see, again, it's nonfiction, but it's fun for me.
Well, and I do love like biographies because there's a story. You learn so much about like the person that you didn't even know.
And how society impacted the choices of that person. Like that's all real. So it, to me, when I read a fiction, I'm like, that couldn't happen. But when it's nonfiction, I'm like, that actually did happen. The whole like adage about, fiction or nonfiction is wilder than fiction. Yeah, that is true.
It is so true. It is so true. I love that. And then what is your final, like, our final question is like, what's your favorite pump you up song? Like get you going.
So I was saying before, I have a whole positive songs playlist. When I come across a song, I add it to my positive song playlist because I really feel like you constantly need to be bombarded by positivity. To keep a positive head, you need to hear positive words all the time. So I have positive quotes that come in my inbox. I have positive music that comes on as soon as I get in the car. But this is not really a pump you up song, but it's One by U2. It's not an upbeat tempo. It's a very somber song, but it's just a reminder that no matter who we are or where we are in our walk of life, we all have a story, and it's those relationships that make a difference. And so that is my go-to, probably favorite song.
One by U2.
Yep.
I'm going to go listen to it because I'm like trying to go back in my Rolodex here and be like, do I know?
You don't want me to sing it to you. And there's a million different remakes of it. So I recommend you like listen to all the remakes because everyone has their little take on it and all of them are beautiful in their own right. But it's a good, solid, positive message song. And we need those.
We do. We really do. My poor kids, they will tell you they're 30 and, 27 now, that I would tell them what you put in your eyes and your ears, in your mouth, impacts your heart and your body, so make sure it's the right kind of stuff that you want being emitted from your life, like how you want to live your life. And so bombarding yourself with positivity is a choice. It's a
It
choice.
truly is, and it does make a difference because I firmly believe if a song is put in your mind, you're like walking through the hallway and you're singing a song, there's a reason. And we
Mhm.
want those to be positive messages. And I'll get in the car sometimes and be like, okay, I need a positive statement, and I'll put on my positive playlist. And then by the time I get to wherever I'm going, I'm in a totally different frame of mind.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. For sure. I love that. Well, April, thank you, thank you, thank you for joining us today. This was truly a gift for me.
Well, thank you for letting me talk about, I mean, I could talk for days, but thank you for letting me talk about how this can positively impact our students.
Yes. And if anyone's interested, April's going to be giving all kinds of workshops this spring and this summer of 2022. And she supports teachers and districts in this big, important work.